My dad looked me dead in the eye and said, "You work so your brother can have a good life. That's just how families work." My mom nodded without saying a word. So I packed my things, walked out, and left them to finally learn what life costs without their personal ATM. Hey everyone. Before we start, I just want to say this is our new channel. We are really working hard to touch our first 1,000 subscribers. So please subscribe the channel and keep this community more bigger. Let's start the story. My name is Leela. I'm 29, no kids, never married. I've been the so-called responsible one in my family since I was 16. I was the first to get a part-time job, the first to get straight A's, the first to graduate college, and the first one to understand how truly selfish my parents were. My younger brother, Mason, is 27 and has never held down a real job for longer than a few months. He dropped out of college his second year and has spent the last 7 years floating between YouTube ideas, gym memberships, crypto schemes, and his latest obsession, streaming himself playing video games for an audience that barely exists. But my parents, they act like he's a misunderstood genius, a prodigy, a delicate artist just waiting for the world to discover him. Meanwhile, I've been working a brutal 60-hour workweek in fintech, slowly climbing the ladder while paying off student loans and contributing to every single family emergency for the past decade. Need a new fridge? Leela will cover it. Mason wrecked the car again. Leela will figure it out. Mom's birthday trip to Italy. Leela's bonus came just in time. I never really said no. I didn't know how, because every time I tried, Dad would guilt me with that same tired line. Families help each other, sweetheart. But it never went both ways. Things came to a head 2 weeks ago. I had just gotten promoted to senior operations manager at my firm, an enormous leap that I'd worked for over 3 years to earn. I was exhausted, but proud. My boss even took me out for dinner to celebrate. When I got home that night, there was a voicemail from my dad. His voice was calm, almost rehearsed. "Hey kiddo, call me back when you can. We need to talk about Mason's future. Love you." Something in my gut twisted, but I called anyway. That call turned into a Sunday dinner at their house, one I immediately regretted walking into. Mason was already seated at the head of the table, wearing one of those smug faux designer hoodies and scrolling on his phone like royalty. Mom had made roast lamb, which she only ever cooked for special occasions. It was all very staged. We made small talk. Mason barely looked up. Then Dad cleared his throat. "So Leela, your mom and I were talking. Mason's had some great opportunities pop up with his channel. He's thinking of starting his own production studio." I blinked. "A what?" "A content production studio," Mason added, without looking at me, "to create premium live stream experiences, whatever that means." Dad jumped in again. "He'll need some help getting it started. A loan, something to give him the runway he needs. Like you had when you started out." "I never had a runway. I worked 3 jobs to survive." "How much?" I asked, my voice dry. Mason finally looked up. "About 70 grand. I laughed, out loud. I couldn't help it. And that's when Dad leaned forward, his eyes suddenly hard. He looked me dead in the eye and said the words that flipped a switch in my brain forever. "You work so your brother can have a good life. That's just how families work." I stared at him, waiting for it to be a joke, a test, something. But my mom just nodded silently, like she agreed, like she'd always agreed. I was shaking, my hands, my chest. I looked around the room. At the house I had basically funded with surprise gifts. At the man-child, across from me, who hadn't earned a cent in years. At my parents, who were now demanding $70,000 like it was owed to them. I stood up. No one moved. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just said one sentence. "I think you've forgotten I'm not your ATM." I went upstairs, packed every last photo, sweater, and spare charger I had at their place, and walked out. Not a single person followed me, not even Mom. When I got in my car, I sat in the driver's seat for a long time. Not crying, not even angry, just done. Done carrying grown adults. Done being the only one sacrificing. Done pretending this was love. I changed my number that night. A few days later, I got an email from my mom asking if I could still send over the money quietly so Mason wouldn't feel embarrassed. I archived it without replying. Then came the texts. My uncle, a cousin I barely know, all of them parroting the same thing. "Your brother needs you." But none of them asked how I was, or if I was okay. I blocked them all. That was 2 weeks ago, and last night, I got a message on LinkedIn, of all places. It was from an old family friend, who had once coached Mason's soccer team. "Leela, I saw your brother's GoFundMe. Is everything all right?" I clicked the link, and there it was. Mason had started a crowdfunding campaign for his streaming studio, complete with a sob story about how his evil sister cut him off. I stared at the screen for a full minute. Then I smiled, because that pathetic fundraiser, that public begging for handouts, was the first time Mason ever had to learn what life costs without their personal ATM. And trust me, I was just getting started. After I found Mason's GoFundMe, I didn't donate, I didn't report it either, I just watched. He had written a dramatic plea, full of half-truths and emotional manipulation. My sister, who I loved more than anything, abandoned me when I needed her most. I have a dream, a vision, I just need help to get there. He even added a fake doctor's note claiming stress-induced migraines and how streaming was the only therapy he could afford. I nearly choked on my tea, but what caught my eye was the comment section. At first, his friends and some extended family tried hyping him up. "You've got this, bro. Don't let the haters stop you." But slowly, the tone changed. Someone commented, "Didn't your sister pay your rent last year?" Another added, "Maybe get a real job instead of asking for $70K for a webcam and a couch." The cracks were forming. The next day, I got a call from my old neighbor, Mrs. Grant. She's in her 70s and has known our family since I was a toddler. She said, very gently, that my mom had come by her house crying. She said I was ungrateful, that I had abandoned them. I stayed silent. Then Mrs. Grant said something that stuck. "Honey, they're not sad you left. They're scared you finally realized you could." That hit me like a freight train. She was right. My parents weren't heartbroken over my absence. They were panicked because they lost their golden goose. The girl who would pay quietly, carry silently, and never ask for anything back. So I made a decision. If they wanted to see me as the family's bank, it was time I closed the account for good. I scheduled a meeting with a financial advisor the following week. I walked in with a thick folder of statements, receipts, and emails that traced back a decade. He raised his eyebrows as he flipped through. "You've been supporting them this whole time." "Yes," I said, "but I want it legally documented that I'm done. No more emergency wires. No more cosigned loans. No more guilt traps." He helped me set up new protections on all my accounts. Passwords, phone authentication, even flagged any previous transactions linked to Mason's accounts. Then I made one last move. I changed my mailing address and removed them from my emergency contact list at work and the hospital. I was free, but it didn't take long before they noticed. 3 weeks after I walked out, my dad showed up at my apartment building. He didn't call, didn't text, just appeared in the lobby like some misplaced CEO. The doorman rang me, hesitantly. "Your father's here, says it's urgent." I almost didn't go down, but I needed closure. I found him pacing in the front hallway, dressed in his Sunday best. Like that made him look more reasonable. "Dad," I said flatly. "Leela, we need to talk." I didn't respond. He softened his voice. "Look, I know things were said that night, but you can't seriously believe we don't love you." "Of course we do." I stayed silent. He continued, "Mason's struggling. The fundraiser didn't take off. He's depressed. Your mom is barely eating. We're falling apart without you." That last sentence, "we're falling apart without you," told me everything I needed to know. Not without your daughter, not without Leela. Without me, the provider, the fixer, the human wallet. I finally asked the question I had swallowed for years. "Dad, did you ever think about what I needed?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. I took a breath and said it plainly. I needed parents, not managers, not debt collectors, not guilt trippers. I needed someone to say, "You've done enough, Leela. Rest." He tried to speak, but I held up my hand. "I loved you, I still do. But love without respect is just control dressed in sweet words. I'm not coming back." His face crumbled, and I turned around and walked away. I didn't cry. That night, I received an email from Mason. It was short, no apology, no ownership, just a bitter line. "Guess I know now who you really are." I didn't reply, but I started living. I traveled to Greece by myself for the first time. I joined a rock climbing group. I even started therapy, real therapy, not the patched-up journaling I used to do between panic attacks. And slowly, I stopped checking their social media. I stopped waiting for an apology that would never come. 6 months passed. One evening, I ran into my cousin Jade at a networking event. She hugged me tightly. "You look lighter," she said. "Happy." "I am," I replied. She nodded. "You know they're still angry. But everyone's starting to see the truth. Aunt May said your dad tried to guilt her into loaning them money for a new car. She told him to ask his millionaire daughter. I laughed. It didn't even sting anymore. Jade smiled. They're learning. Leela slowly, painfully. But they are. Maybe they were, maybe not. But I was done waiting. And as I left that event and walked under the city lights, I realized something beautiful. Sometimes walking away isn't quitting. Sometimes it's the most powerful thing you can do. Because when you stop being the family ATM, you start being a person again. And I finally liked the person I was becoming.